The Japanese dreamed again in themselves and aimed to build a supersonic aircraft. The Mitsubishi Regional Jet, later renamed Mitsubishi SpaceJet, was the name of this dream. Bombardier and Embraer had established their own kingdom among aircraft, and this is an aircraft that came to destroy it. It is not an aircraft made for the country, but this aircraft meant making a new aircraft, and it was meant to overturn other competitors. The SpaceJet was neither a groundbreaking wide-body aircraft nor a jumbo jet. It was smart, compact, and efficient. A very powerful aeroplane and a very intelligent aeroplane. It had to be that way. It had to be that way. Why this aeroplane crashed so suddenly is unknown. At first, it was at the top of its game. If you have certification cancellations or customer delays, you will fall from the top to the bottom. Design changes, management changes, and the bitter truth that it is much more difficult to enter the aircraft manufacturing industry, despite Japan's engineering heritage. The first time a Japanese aircraft came out, and they hoped it would last a long time, but it didn't. On the contrary, it turned into a cautionary tale. SpaceJet started to attract interest in the aviation industry in the middle of the decade. Orders began to come in, notably from SkyWest, one of the largest regional airlines in the United States, and All Nippon Airways, ANA. Mitsubishi used a geared engine instead of using a normal engine, which took a risk, and this engine was always failing. There would be plenty of cabin space and care would be taken for passenger comfort. However, there were one or two tricks. Constant redesigns were 6 years ago there was a virus, so every company started to decline. Airlines were struggling to maintain their business without thinking about expanding their fleets. Every company's business was disappearing from time to time, disappearing in an instant. Mitsubishi was starting to recover from losses. Millions in losses. How are they going to pay for it? The timetables changed over and over again. With orders on hold and investor confidence eroding, the business had few options left. It had been 15 years since this aircraft came out, and it would be very difficult to unplug this aircraft. But it had already been unplugged 2 years ago. The hangars were dark. The crews changed places. The dream ended with the silent closing of a section rather than a loud explosion. However, the legacy continues. What prevented one of the world's most technologically advanced countries from launching its first passenger jet in the 21st century? Was it poor planning, bad timing, or a deeper aspect of the harsh economics of contemporary aviation? And suddenly an opportunity may arise, and it must be pursued. At this point, although the name SpaceJet promised a promising transformation, it was in fact a facade of profound uncertainty. In order to be admired by everyone and to attract a lot of attention, Mitsubishi put a slightly smaller version of the SpaceJet M90 aircraft in everyone's eyes. This model was specially resized to comply with the 76-seat limit specified in the U.S. scope clause. Fuel economy, a comfortable and technologically very good interior, all this looked ideal on paper. But still, this aircraft sold very few. Perhaps Mitsubishi's biggest problem was timing. At a time when an aircraft could survive depending on both its technical characteristics and its position in the market. Due to the successful entry of the Embraer E2 series into the market at that time, Embraer was attracting other companies like a spider web and was a very well-known company, so its sales were also good. In addition, the pandemic had increased the unpredictability of regional flights, making airlines and investors more cautious. Could SpaceJet really take off in these conditions? Or would this be the point at which Japan's desire to reach the stars was permanently postponed? And the answer had already begun to emerge by 2020. These sales declined because of the pandemic. If only this pandemic had not happened. In this environment, the bells were ringing for SpaceJet. Even though the airline has not yet delivered to a single customer or even fully entered the production line, Mitsubishi was doing well overseas, but then suddenly reduced sales. Then the American Test Center was closed, and the project was stopped, and no one believed it would ever be sold again. All this pointed to strategic isolation rather than technical incompetence. Like its culture, Japan's first national aircraft was built with discipline, but it ended prematurely. Going global required more than just a good airplane. It also required aggressive marketing, flexible management, perfect timing, and a thorough understanding of the dynamics of international certification. Mitsubishi began to solve problems with engineering marvels. In other cases, however, it was either late or less aggressive than its Western competitors. The Japanese wanted to be number one in the aviation industry, but their aeroplanes ended up on dusty shelves. However, the question remains, the Japanese, with one of the world's most advanced engineering cultures, failed. But can any other nation succeed? Was it a cultural barrier hitting the invisible rules of aviation? Or was this failure truly technical? The SpaceJet project was a necessity for the Japanese, but the Japanese have thrown away this opportunity. This is an important warning for any new venture trying to grow in the shadow of giants such as Boeing and Airbus. In aviation, things like punctuality, reputation, and engineering are very important. Japanese engineers continue to visit MRJ's prototypes today. Moving silently among the rusting fuselages, they may be witnessing not a dashed hope, but a process that could eventually start again. Everyone has experienced that the Japanese need second chances. So, is SpaceJet's quiet exit really the end? I think the Japanese are waiting for the right moment to build another airplane. What do you think? Certainly the SpaceJet story is far from over. In fact, this could be the beginning of a process of learning lessons and revitalizing the Japanese aviation industry. On the intentional certification, once of this only raising face and technical problems, show that Mitsubishi has much higher goals than just creating an aircraft. This was an attempt to develop domestic technology and Japan's desire to establish a strong presence on the international aviation scene. The biggest problem with this aircraft was certification. If this problem was solved, we had a chance to see this aircraft in the air, but it did not happen. SpaceJet was called an environmentally friendly aircraft, and very little money was spent on it compared to other aircraft, making it particularly suitable for regional airlines. It aimed to change the industry with its aerodynamic fuselage and smaller fuel-efficient engines. The project became difficult in the later processes, which led to an increase in cost, and also because this certification problem has not yet been resolved. However, Mitsubishi has benefited greatly from this experience. Setting new aerospace technology standards and creating a strong foundation for future projects required this important training process. SpaceJet, an important milestone, demonstrated to us that the Japanese were very ambitious individuals. But was the Mitsubishi SpaceJet project a complete failure in the history of Japanese aviation? Or was it a harbinger of future aircraft technologies? The rest of the story will take shape over time. Could this aircraft prevent the Japanese from flying their other aircraft? And could this project herald a comeback in the world market? Mitsubishi SpaceJet represents ambitious goals and a challenging journey. This project, with both triumphs and failures, reflects Japan's efforts to make its voice heard in the aerospace industry. The Japanese have learned lessons from these losses, whether in certification or cost or transport, so that they will not make mistakes in the future. Considering how fast the aviation industry is changing, Mitsubishi's creative approach and the lessons learned from this project could pave the way for a new era in Japanese aviation. Do you believe that Mitsubishi SpaceJet is a technological failure or an important progress? Will these mistakes make the Japanese wiser